The blood-curdling howl pierced through the midnight silence, sending chills down Martha Williams' spine as she bolted upright in her bedroom. It was her golden retriever, Max, but this wasn't his usual bark. This was something primal, terrifying, almost human-like in its anguish. As she rushed downstairs, she found Max standing rigid in the living room, his eyes fixed on the empty corner, his entire body trembling with what could only be described as pure terror. What Martha didn't know was that, at that exact moment, thousands of dogs across 3 continents were doing the exact same thing, all staring at invisible horrors that humans couldn't perceive. It was October 15, 2023, and what happened that night would validate the most bone-chilling prophecy ever made by Edgar Cayce, the legendary sleeping prophet who had terrified audiences for decades with his uncanny ability to peer into the future. In 1944, during one of his most disturbing trance sessions, Cayce had delivered a warning so shocking that his own secretary refused to type it up for weeks. He spoke of a time when animals would become windows into dimensions of reality that would make humanity question everything they believed about consciousness, death, and the very fabric of existence itself. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez was analyzing seismic data at the University of California when she first noticed the pattern. Her German shepherd, Kaiser, hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks, constantly pacing and whimpering at frequencies that seemed to correlate with underground electromagnetic disturbances that her instruments could barely detect. But Kaiser wasn't alone. Reports were flooding in from pet owners worldwide about their animals exhibiting behaviors that defied every law of nature they thought they understood. In Tokyo, a cat named Yuki had been found arranging household objects into perfect mathematical spirals every night for 2 months. In London, an entire pack of stray dogs had begun gathering in Trafalgar Square at exactly 3:33 a.m., sitting in formation for precisely 17 minutes before dispersing without a sound. Marine biologists off the coast of Australia documented whales creating underwater sound patterns that, when analyzed, contained prime number sequences that shouldn't exist in nature. Edgar Cayce had seen this coming nearly 8 decades earlier. During that terrifying 1944 reading, his voice had taken on an otherworldly quality as he described a future where the boundaries between dimensions would begin to collapse, and animals would serve as living conduits between our reality and realms that existed beyond human perception. The creatures of the earth, he had whispered in his trance state, will become the harbingers of changes so profound that mankind will either evolve or face extinction. They see what approaches from the other side of the veil. The breakthrough came from Dr. Chun Wei at MIT, who had been quietly studying quantum consciousness in animals for 5 years. Her research, initially dismissed by the scientific community, suddenly became the most important work on the planet when she discovered that animals weren't just predicting future events. They were actually perceiving parallel dimensions where those events had already occurred. The electromagnetic signatures in their brains showed patterns identical to theoretical models of interdimensional perception. But it was a viral video from a small town in Montana that changed everything. Sarah Mitchell had been documenting her border collie's strange behavior for months, watching as Luna would interact with invisible presences, bringing toys to empty spaces and exhibiting signs of distress around areas where nothing visible existed. When Sarah finally set up infrared cameras, she captured footage that sent shockwaves through the global scientific community. The thermal imaging revealed shadowy figures moving through her house, figures that only Luna could see with her naked eyes. The video sparked a worldwide phenomenon. Pet owners everywhere began reporting similar experiences. Dogs refusing to enter certain rooms, cats hissing at empty air, horses bucking when led through seemingly normal pastures. But the most disturbing reports came from animal shelters and veterinary clinics. Newborn animals, barely days old, were displaying fear responses to specific locations and invisible stimuli with a consistency that suggested they were seeing something that had always been there, something that adult humans had simply learned to filter out. Dr. Rodriguez's team made a discovery that validated Cayce's most terrifying prediction. They found that animals born after 2020 showed dramatically increased activity in brain regions associated with extrasensory perception. These creatures weren't just sensitive, they were evolutionarily adapting to perceive dimensions that existed parallel to our own. The implications were staggering. If Cayce was right, humanity was witnessing the emergence of a new type of consciousness, one that could bridge the gap between life and death, between our reality and whatever lay beyond. The government response was swift and secretive. Within months, classified research programs were established to study these animals, not out of scientific curiosity, but out of fear of what they might reveal. Military applications were obvious. Animals that could perceive threats from other dimensions would be the ultimate early warning system. But the deeper implications were terrifying. If animals could see into parallel realities, what did that mean for human consciousness? What did it mean for death itself? The answer came from an unexpected source. In a small hospice in Oregon, a cat named Shadow had been documented approaching patients hours before they died, not to comfort them, but to seemingly interact with invisible presences in their rooms. When researchers finally analyzed the electromagnetic readings during these encounters, they discovered that Shadow was responding to energy signatures that matched theoretical models of consciousness existing independently from physical bodies. Edgar Cayce's prophecy wasn't just about animals becoming psychic. It was about the revelation that consciousness itself transcended physical death, and animals were becoming our guides to understanding this terrifying truth. The sleeping prophet had seen a future where the veil between life and death would grow thin, where animals would serve as bridges to dimensions where the deceased continued to exist in forms we couldn't comprehend. As reports continued to pour in from around the world, a chilling pattern emerged. Animals weren't just seeing ghosts or spirits. They were interacting with versions of reality where different choices had been made, where different outcomes had occurred. They were living windows into the multiverse itself, and their behavior was becoming increasingly agitated as they witnessed the convergence of these parallel realities. The scientific community finally had to confront the impossible. Consciousness wasn't produced by the brain, it was a fundamental force of the universe, existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Animals had never lost their connection to this broader reality. They had always been able to perceive the full spectrum of existence, while humans had evolved to see only a narrow slice of what was actually there. But Cayce's most chilling prediction was yet to be fulfilled. He had spoken of a time when these animal abilities would reach a crescendo, when their behavior would become so undeniable that humanity would face a choice that would determine the fate of our species. We could either embrace this expanded understanding of consciousness and evolution, or we could reject it and face the consequences of remaining blind to the true nature of reality. As 2024 progressed, that moment of reckoning drew closer. Animals worldwide began exhibiting synchronized behaviors that suggested they were receiving instructions from sources beyond our dimension. The message they were trying to convey was becoming clearer with each passing day. Something was coming, something that would change everything we thought we knew about life, death, and consciousness itself. Edgar Cayce's terrifying prophecy about animals wasn't just a glimpse into the future. It was a warning about the evolution of consciousness itself, and humanity's last chance to prepare for a transformation that would either elevate our species or destroy us completely. The animals have been trying to show us the way forward. The question now is whether we're brave enough to follow them into dimensions we never knew existed, or whether we'll remain trapped in our limited perception until it's too late to change our fate. The prophecy is unfolding exactly as the sleeping prophet foresaw, and time is running out for humanity to make the choice that will determine whether we evolve or become extinct in the face of a reality far more complex and terrifying than we ever imagined.